She was only 15 when her own father handed her over to one of Al-Qaeda's leaders as part of a family agreement. What should have been considered an honor became a silent prison marked by abuse, fear, and control. Yet in the midst of the pain, Amara experienced something unexplainable, a vision of a man dressed in white that ignited within her an unknown hope. What seemed like nothing more than a fevered delusion became the starting point of a secret journey of faith, escape, and redemption. In this video, you will hear the true and moving account of a woman who discovered freedom when she no longer believed it existed. If you believe that stories like this can touch lives and awaken hearts, subscribe to the channel now and turn on notifications. That helps us keep sharing transformative testimonies like Amara's. Also, don't forget to comment below with the city or country from which you're watching this video. It's always a joy to see how far these stories reach.
I remember exactly the day my father called me into the courtyard. The sun was intense. The dust in the air seemed to hang frozen in time, and I still clutched my rag doll, already torn on the left side. I was 15, but I felt even smaller inside. When he told me I was to be given in marriage, my stomach clenched. At first, I didn't understand. I thought it must be one of the neighbors' stories or some misunderstanding, but no. He was serious, and there was pride in his eyes. He said it was an honor for our family, that I would become the wife of a powerful man, a respected leader. I did not know this man. I only heard whispers. Commander, important, warrior of Allah. My body went cold. I tried to say something, but my voice wouldn't come. All I could do was stare at the ground and feel, for the first time, that my life no longer belonged to me. The night before the marriage, my mother was silent. She brushed my hair calmly but without looking me in the eyes. I wanted to ask her why. Why did no one defend me? Why did it all seem so normal? But in that house, there was no room for questions. The next day, they led me away in silence, covered from head to toe. There was no music, no flowers, no celebration. Only the harsh stares of the men, weapons hanging at their sides, and that smell of sweat and dust. The man who would be my husband barely looked at me. He was much older. His face was marked by time, and his gaze was expressionless. They locked me in a room, alone, as if I were an object delivered to him. And it was there that I first cried without knowing whether I was still a child or already dead inside. The first week was a blur in my memory. I woke and slept without knowing what day it was. The other women in the house, yes, there were other wives, hardly spoke to me. Some looked at me with pity, others with coldness. I was the youngest, and I suppose that affected each of them in different ways. There were strict orders, schedules for everything, and rules I didn't fully understand, but that, when broken, were followed by punishment. It wasn't long before I received my first beating. I had dropped a cloth on the floor and was accused of disobedience. The one who struck me was not my husband, but a guard. I bled from the nose and had a black eye for days. No one came to my aid. They only handed me an old handkerchief and told me to learn to be obedient. It was there, curled up in a dark corner, that I began to understand what hell really was. And yet, I prayed my own way, though I didn't fully understand. But it seemed God did not hear me. Time inside that place was not measured by clocks, but by screams, by the heavy footsteps in the hallway, by doors slamming shut. I felt trapped inside. One day, after suffering a high fever, I fainted. I woke up trembling, my body burning. And it was then that something happened that I have never told without shivering. I saw a man standing before me. He was not from that place. He wore whites and had a face I cannot properly describe. He radiated calm with just his gaze. He said nothing. He simply extended his hand toward me, and in that instant, I felt peace. For the first time in years, my heart felt light. It was as swift as it was real. When I opened my eyes again, I was alone, still lying down. But something within me had changed. I couldn't explain it, but I was certain that moment was not just a fever dream. It was a sign. After that dream or vision, I do not know, something awakened within me. It was not a sudden surge of courage, nor an overwhelming strength. It was more like a small spark hidden among the ruins. I didn't tell anyone. of course. I knew what kind of punishment would befall me if anyone thought I was unbalanced. But inside, it was as if I had heard something. A silent voice saying, "Wait." And I waited. Days later, I grew even sicker. My back was covered in sores and the fever wouldn't lift. It was then that they took me to a clandestine clinic run by a Frenchwoman. The place was small, hidden in a neighborhood controlled by militias, and her name was Lil. She looked at me as no one had in a long time with care. She asked my name, my age, and when she heard me say 15, her jaw trembled. She said nothing, only squeezed my hand tightly. It was in that touch that I began to remember what it meant to feel affection. In the days that followed, Lee tended my wounds and came back whenever she could. She was gentle, yet attentive, as if she knew the weight I carried. One day, while cleaning a sore on my back, she whispered in my ear, "Do you believe in hope?" At first, I didn't understand. I stayed silent. And she only said, "If you ever want to talk, I'll be here." 2 weeks later, she gave me a folded piece of paper. It was a page torn from a book. I didn't even know what it was, but I hid it under my scarf, fearing someone would find it. That night, alone, I opened the paper slowly and read the first line. "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." It was as if something pierced me from within. I read those words about 10 times. Each term seemed written for me. That night, after reading those lines, I wept in silence. It wasn't like the desperate sobs of those first months of marriage. It was different. It was as if someone had finally heard my pain. I began to look forward to new pages, and they arrived hidden among bandages, rolled in a piece of gauze, even sewn into my clothing. Lee never spoke openly of it, but her eyes said it all. It was as if she knew I needed that light, even if only a spark at a time. I read in secret, always Shachi dawn, under a thin blanket. I began to learn of this man called Jesus. He spoke of forgiveness, of love, of freedom. Freedom. A word I no longer knew how to pronounce aloud. The stories I read confused me and, at the same time, unsettled me. Who was this man who loved rejected women, who touched the sick, who spoke with authority yet compassion? He was unlike any man I had ever known. Gradually, something changed in me. I no longer walked, stooped. My eyes stopped fleeing from mirrors. I began to pray again, but this time too that God who seemed different from the one I had been taught about, a God who did not shout, who did not punish with hatred, but who called me by Namor. At least that's how I felt it. One day, after another visit from Lee, she looked at me intently and asked, "Do you trust me?" I hesitated. For the first time in years, trusting someone seemed possible, yet frightening. I nodded. Then she said, "Then you must be ready. I am going to get you out of here." My heart raced. I was breathless. I thought of my family, the other women, the commander, the threats, but I also thought of that outstretched hand, of that biblical phrase, and for the first time, between fear and doubt, I felt a yes deep within me. The days that followed, I could hardly sleep. Achi, every door creak, at every footstep in the hallway, my body reacted as if I were about to be discovered. The idea of escape seemed madness, but it was the only thing that made sense to me. Lee gave me very precise instructions. Tell no one. Pretend everything was normal. Conserve my energy. And she promised me that when the time came, I would know. One stifling morning, while I was cleaning a corridor of the house, I overheard 2 women whispering that Lee had been taken in for questioning. My blood ran cold. I thought it was all over. But that very afternoon, she appeared at the clinic as if nothing had happened. She looked at me and simply said, "Today?" I froze. "Today," I repeated in disbelief. She nodded, and, for the first time, I sensed that this was the moment God had prepared for me. I did not know what awaited me on the other side, but I knew perfectly well what would happen if I stayed, and that I could no longer bear. When night fell, I feigned illness, and they took me back to the clinic. Everything had been arranged. A car waited on the opposite corner, hidden between 2 abandoned buildings. The driver was a silent man who uttered not a word, but he looked me in the eyes before opening the door. It was as if he said, "Trust. Just go." Lee gave me a brief, strong hug, like a mother who doesn't know if she will see her daughter again. She handed me a small package and whispered, "Don't open it now, only when you are safe." I got into the car. My heart felt like it would burst. As the vehicle pulled away, every street felt like an endless maze. I trembled from head to toe, but something inside me was different. Faith. A small but firm faith. A faith that told me, keep going. We traveled for hours. I didn't know where we were headed, and I confess, at one point I thought it might be a trap. But I remained silent. The road was dark, full of corvis, and the silence in the car was heavy. Each minute felt like an eternity. At times, my mind drifted back to the house I had fled, wondering if they had noticed my absence, if they were searching for me, if they had captured Lil. But the memory of the words I had read and the vision of that man in white brought me back to the present. I was afraid, of course, a fear that knotted my stomach, but alongside it, something new, hope. When we finally stopped, the driver pointed to a simple building, half hidden among trees. It was a kind of safe house run by foreign volunteers. I was greeted by a woman with a foreign accent. She called me sister and said, "You are safe now." That night, I slept on a humble mattress under a coarse blanket, but I slept better than I had in years. For the first time, no one locked the door from the outside. No one shouted. No one struck me. And in the dead of night, when everything was silent, I remembered the package Lee had given me. I opened it carefully. Inside was a small New Testament with handwritten notes on several pages. On the cover was a phrase in Arabic, "You are free." I held it for minutes. I did not cry. I only remained silent, because my heart was so full that any sound seemed inadequate. It was then that I understood that although the whole world might reject me, there was one place where I was welcomed, and that place was the arms of a God I was beginning to truly know. In the days that followed, I spoke little. It was as if my mind were trying to assimilate everything that had happened. Everything felt distant, as if I had been ripped from one world and thrown into another, a world where no one silenced me, where I could walk without covering my face, where people smiled at me without judgment or interest. Still, I was afraid to dream, to trust, to let my guard down. I woke at night with my heart racing, thinking the men from the house had found me and would take me back. But in those moments, I pressed the little New Testament to my chest and reread Leah's notes. One read, "When fear comes, remember, you have already survived the worst." And it was true. I was alive. I was free. And, above all, I was beginning to recognize myself again. I remember exactly the day they moved me, after several weeks in hiding, to another country with the help of a Christian support network. They arranged my papers, gave me a new name, and explained that, from then on, my story would be protected. On the plane, looking out the window, I wept. I wept in silence, as one empties years of pain. And on that flight, between earth and sky, I offered my first prayer aloud. I asked God to watch over my mother. I begged that somehow she would know I was still alive. I also prayed that He would show me what to do with this freedom, because I did not yet know. I only felt that none of it could be in vain, that there was a purpose, and that somehow I wanted to find a way to give back all the love and salvation I had received. In a new country, everything was different. The clothes, the smells, the sounds. At first, I could barely step outside without feeling exposed. I suffered panic attacks those first months. I felt guilty for smiling, ashamed to sit at a table with men, afraid to look anyone in the eye. But little by little, with the help of women in the community who took me in, I relearned how to live. They taught me to write my new name, to use public transit, to buy bread, simple things that felt like climbing mountains to me. One day, a woman named Miriam invited me to church. I hesitated. I still distrusted anything religious. But I went. It was a small place, with pale walls and wooden pews. A simple cross hung on the wall, and soft music played. When the service began, people sang with their hands raised, and I could only watch until the pastor read a verse, "He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds." In that instant, I felt as if it were spoken directly to me. After the service, I sat on the furthest bench alone. A young woman came to me and asked if I wanted to pray with her. I said nothing. But she sat beside me and prayed anyway, softly and simply. And in that moment, I felt something so powerful that I could not hold back my tears. I wept until I could hardly breathe, as if everything I'd held inside for years burst out at once. When I finally calmed down, I looked at the cross and thought, if this God saved me from hell, then he has a plan for my life. From that day on, I began attending church whenever I could not because anyone forced me, but because I wanted to know more about the Jesus who found me at my lowest. A Jesus who appeared when no one else did. A Jesus who called me by name, even when I believed I had none left. Over time, I began to share my story with people at the church. At first it was hard. My voice trembled and I didn't know where to start. But I realized that when I spoke, people listened with their hearts. Some cried, others embraced me afterward, and I felt that this too healed me, bit by bit. It was during one of those conversations that someone asked if I'd ever thought about helping other girls. That question resonated in my head for weeks. I knew that at that very moment, other girls like me were being sold, handed over, silenced. I knew what it was to grow up afraid to speak, afraid to exist. So I began writing letters, which were translated and sent to shelters and communities serving refugee girls. I never used my real name. I signed only as a sister who survived, and little by little, those letters began reaching places I never imagined. I was told some girls wept when they read them. Others asked if this sister was still alive. Yes, I was alive, and now, truly alive. That's when I realized my testimony was not only about pain, but about rebirth. One day, at a church event, I was invited on stage to share a fragment of my journey. The hall was full. I shook so badly that I almost refused. But when I took the microphone, I breathed deeply and remembered the first time Lee asked if I trusted her. And I said, I am Amara. I was a prisoner. But today, I am free, thanks to Jesus. The silence in the room was absolute. Then the applause came, but what remained was the peace in my chest, the peace of someone who knows that, even after so much darkness, they found light. Not just any light, but one that never goes out. Although I was in another country, with another name and another life, the memories never vanished. Sometimes I woke in the middle of the night to the sound of doors slamming in my mind, as if I were still trapped in that room. Other times, walking down the street, I'd fear being followed, as if someone would take me back. It was hard to explain to others. On the outside, I seemed fine, but inside some scars still ached. It was speaking with an older pastor that I understood healing is a process that God does not expect us to forget everything, but to allow Him to transform even what seemed impossible to use. I began praying not only for myself but for the girls still silenced somewhere in the world. I joined support groups and projects with refugees, and whenever I heard other trembling voices share their stories, I saw in them the same Amara I once was, the quiet, terrified girl without a name. And I would say to them, you too can be free. But one thing never left my mind. That man in white, that moment in the fever when all seemed lost, and that figure appeared before me in silence, with a gaze full of peace. I never saw him again. I never had another vision like it. But to this day, when I close my eyes and pray, I feel that same peace surround me. That showed me that Jesus does not need to appear with thunder, lightning, or dramatic miracles. Sometimes he comes when one lies on the ground. Believing it is overrun, he simply extends his hand. He says nothing. He is just there. And that changes everything. To this day I cannot fully explain it. I only know it happened, and that after that, nothing was ever the same. There was a time when I wondered why Jesus showed himself only once. Why he didn't speak to me again with that clarity. I prayed, I read the Bible, I helped others, but I had no more visions, no voices, nothing extraordinary. That caused me doubt. I thought maybe I had done something wrong, that perhaps he saved me by mistake. But slowly I understood that genuine faith does not depend on signs but on trust. He had already shown me everything I needed to know, that he exists, that he sees me, that he loves me. The rest was walking with him, even when heaven remained silent. And you know what is most beautiful? That without seeing him, I felt he was still by my side in the way I was protected in the embrace of the right people, in the doors that opened, and above all, in the peace that never left me. Some people think that after conversion life becomes a fairy tale, but it isn't so. I still battle the memories. I still have crying episodes. I still startle at loud noises, and I still mourn the loss of my family. I don't know if my mother thinks of me. I don't know if my siblings believe I fled willingly. Maybe they think I died. Maybe they have forgotten me. That hurts, but it also teaches me to pray differently. Today, when I kneel, I do not ask to forget the past. I ask to be used by God in spite of it, because if He managed to pull me from that abyss, then He can use my story to reach other girls still trapped, and that is what I want to do for the rest of my life. Be the voice I once lacked, the answer I prayed for and thought would never come. Today I work with a Christian organization that shelters refugee girls and victims of violence. Many arrive in silence, just as I once did, with empty eyes and even afraid of their own name. And when I look at them, I see the former Amara. I don't try to impose anything. I don't speak of faith at once. First I listen, I hug, and let them feel safe, because I know what it's like to live years not knowing what it means to trust. Little by little, some open up, share fragments, reveal scars on their bodies, and even deeper ones in their souls. And when the time is right, I tell my testimony not with pride, but with sincerity. I show the little New Testament I still carry, all crumpled, with Leah's notes, and I speak of the outstretched hand of the man in white, and of the peace I found without deserving it. Many times they weep not in sorrow, but in relief, because they realize they are not alone. There are days I wonder what my life would have been if my father had not handed me over in that agreement, if I had studied, chosen whom to marry, had a normal adolescence. But I do not remain stuck there, because what God did with me surpassed all that. He not only freed me from pain, but gave me purpose. And that is what drives me each morning, knowing that my life can be the beginning of someone else's freedom. I am not perfect. I still carry trauma. But I am free, and that is enough. There are those who live whole lives and never feel that. I, despite everything I endured, can say without hesitation, today I breathe peace. And that peace has a name, Jesus. Sometimes I still dream of that house, of the icy corridors, the muffled screams, the invisible weight in the air. I wake terrified, sweating, heart racing, but today I know that is not a sign of weakness, but the echo of a pain that existed but no longer defines me. I no longer feel ashamed of what happened. I survived, and Marie was transformed. One day, one of the youngest girls asked if I still felt anger at my father, at the women who silenced me, at the man who harmed me. I breathed deeply before answering, because yes, I have felt much rage, and even the urge to scream or curse them all. But today I feel something else, compassion for those who live unaware of authentic love. Pity for those who repeat violence believing they do right, and compassion, because if Jesus could forgive those who crucified him, who am I to harbor hate? But one thing has never changed. From that day on the ground, burning with fever and blood, when I saw the man in white, until today, I never fully understood what that was. I never had another vision like it. I have read similar accounts and spoken with pastors, but no one explains it completely. Some say it was only a hallucination, others that it was Jesus himself. Honestly, I don't know. I only know what I felt. It was real, more real than any pain I've experienced. It was as if, for a moment, heaven opened to me. And if it truly was Jesus, that means he saw Mimi, a lost girl in the midst of terror. He saw me, and that changes everything. Because if he saw me, he sees everyone. He sees you. And if he appeared for me when no one else did, I believe he still does today. Many years have passed since all that. Much has changed, but one thing remains the same. I keep that New Testament as part of my body. Sometimes I reread the same pages. Other times I write in the margins as if I were in dialogue with Jesus. I never fully got used to this new life, and perhaps I shouldn't, because the scars I carry are reminders of where God lifted me from. I don't want to forget them, not out of love for the pain, but because they remind me of grace, There isn't a day I don't thank God for finding me where no one believed there was hope. And whenever a new girl arrives, frightened and silent, I extend my hand without a word just like that man in white because sometimes that alone is enough for someone to feel they are not alone. And do you know what's the strangest thing? Even after all I've lived, I cannot explain exactly how it happened. Sometimes I think about how it all began with a dream. Other times I wonder if it was real at all. But every time doubt arises, I remember this. My life changed completely after that. And the peace I carry today is not something made up. It is as if, for a brief instant, heaven descended to me, then disappeared and was never the same. But it stayed with me in the way I speak, in how I listen and care for others. It is in my way of praying, in that silence filled with a presence that never leaves me. And that is why I press on, because I was seen, I was saved. And although no one may understand, I know what I experienced, and that no one can ever take from me. There are days I walk down the street and lift my gaze to the sky as if searching for that look again. I see nothing, no light, no voice, only the sky, sometimes cloudy, sometimes blue. Still, I feel that moment remains alive within me, not like a movie miracle, but as an indelible memory. That is why I tell my story, because I know there are people right now living what I lived. Trapped souls, fearful, believing that God does not see, that He does not care, that He has given up on them. And I want to tell them, He sees, He cares, and even when everything says otherwise, even if you hear or see nothing, He can appear sometimes in a simple way, sometimes with a silence full of presence. And when He does, even if only for an instant, nothing is ever the same again. My story does not end with grand miracles or promises of perfection. In fact, after my liberation, life remained difficult in many ways, but something inside me never went out. A silent, serene certainty that no one taught me, but that I carry with me. Today I still cannot fully explain what I experienced nor find the precise words. It was real and, at the same time, seemed outside of time. I only know that, since that day, I have never been the same. And if you ask me how it all began, I can only say one thing. With an outstretched hand in the midst of pain and a God who appeared and then disappeared, but never abandoned me.
What have we learned from Amara's story? That even in the darkest, most desperate moments, God can find a soul and reach out a hand. That His silence is not absence, and that true freedom begins within the heart, even when everything around us seems lost. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced a moment when you felt God appear in the silence? Or had an experience that deeply marked your faith? Share with us in the comments. Your story might touch someone today. If this video spoke to you, subscribe to the channel now and hit the bell so you don't miss the next testimonies that, like this one, can transform lives. And if you enjoy this content and want to help this project keep growing, click the Become a Member button below. It's quick, simple, and makes all the difference. The next video is already appearing on your screen. Click it now and continue with us on this journey of faith, truth, and hope. May God bless you. We'll see each other in the next video.